Welcome to Unwind, a weekly recap of everything MacStories and more. I'm your host, John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You know what? We are having a lot of busy weeks with lots of new apps and great updates. So we have a lot to share with everybody because we covered a lot of different things this week. And you know what? What's really telling to me, even more than what is on the site, is that the last few weeks, the newsletters for the club have been just packed with all sorts of apps because there's literally more apps than we can write reviews of because, I mean, there's, a review takes some real time and some of that overflow hits the club and there's some really good gems in there as well.
Yeah. And it's really impossible. We're a small team and there's so many apps and utilities coming out that it's very challenging for us to keep up with the things that we want to write about. But there's so much interesting stuff just happening on the App Store lately that, it can be really challenging for us to find the time to review everything. And that is why I think it's very useful for us to have the MacStories Weekly newsletter for Club MacStories members delivered every week because we can highlight, without necessarily having to do an in-depth review, but we can highlight a lot of these interesting new apps and updates that we come across in the app debuts section of the newsletter. And I mean, just last week, we had something like 20 app debuts. Yeah. This week, it's more, I think, at least personally, I focused more on the shortcuts set of things, but we're going to talk about that later. But yes, the MacStories, we've been putting a lot of effort into diversifying and doing a lot for club members lately, and I think it shows that MacStories Weekly, all the newsletters have been really packed lately.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get started with talking about what happened this week on the site. And the first review that I want to call out is one that Ryan did for Noto 2.0 because this is a newfangled note-taking app that came onto the scene.
That's a
really
good word, newfangled.
Yeah, that is a good. You should put that one in
lookup.
So anyway, Noto 2.0. Noto is a note-taking app, and you discovered this, I don't know, maybe
randomly.
I think, very randomly last fall. Yes. I think after you did your review. And what's cool about it is that it's the only note-taking app that we've seen that does things like lets you put all sorts of things in a table, for instance, whether it's a video or an image or whatever. And they just came out with 2.0 this week, and it has things like pointer support. It is now syncing with CloudKit instead of iCloud Drive, and that's important because it's a lot faster and more reliable than having documents syncing with iCloud Drive. It's really a superior solution for that. There's also a form of importing that's allowable from other apps. So, for instance, the Apple Notes app, if you want to move some of your notes into Noto, you can do that now. And you can do it by just selecting a whole bunch of them and dragging them over into Noto, which is an interesting approach to it that Ryan says works really well. And there were, along with that, I guess, a bunch of other bug fixes too. But this app is really, it's going somewhere. It's had a lot of updates over the course of the month since we have been keeping an eye on it. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they do next.
Yeah, Noto is a really interesting app. It's got a fascinating set of additions to the standard note-taking experience. I mean, even things like when you paste a URL, you don't get the raw HTTPS URL in your note. You get a rich link powered by the new rich link framework of iOS 13. And as you mentioned, the ability to have these rich tables that have video that even plays in line and all kinds of formatting options for text inside tables and even images and links inside tables. That makes it a really fascinating app to, for example, make your own sort of like databases, to tables to store data that go beyond text. At least that's how I've been using it to track. For example, my Unwind media recommendations, I now track in a table in Noto because I can have like these multiple sections for music, articles, movies, videos, and everything else. And when I paste a link, I get the preview. So when I save an Apple Music link, I get the Apple Music preview in Noto. And then later, when it's time to put together the show notes and the recommendations for Unwind, I can go in there and I can pick and choose. It's a very useful system to me. So yeah, Noto 2.0, definitely check it out. I think the developer is also already working on fixing some of the issues that Ryan mentioned in his review. The developer tweeted at me just yesterday showing a screenshot with a native context menu. One of Ryan's criticism for the app was the reliance on these custom menus when you tap and hold content inside of the text editor. And I think the developer is working on just adopting the Apple native context menus that work better with the pointer and with long presses. So it's good to see that the developer is listening and already working on updates.
Federico, why don't you tell me a little bit about IA Writer, because it got a pretty nice update this week too that I know you linked to.
Yeah, IA Writer 5.5. This version has been in beta testing for a while. I actually mentioned this originally in my modular computer story from back in April. And the highlight of this release, so IA Writer is my favorite text editor on all Apple platforms. And in this version, on iPad specifically, there's deep integration with the trackpad and the system pointer. So, of course, you can select toolbar buttons and other UI elements, but there's also a couple of interesting custom additions. So there's support for swipe gestures. You can swipe horizontally with 2 fingers to show and hide the sidebar, so the library, which is a really great way to navigate the file system inside IA Writer, but also hide the sidebar completely. When you want to focus on writing or editing text, you can just swipe with 2 fingers and the sidebar goes away. And then if you want to invoke it again, you just swipe again from left to right and you show the sidebar. It's really well done. And also with the pointer, you can now hover over the title of a document in the title bar or the name of a folder in the sidebar. And that name, that title will be selected. And if you click with the pointer, you can rename it. And this is the kind of interaction that instantly made sense for me. I was about to say instantly clicked for me, but yes. And it's the kind of interaction that I would love to see in more document-based apps now, because it totally makes sense. You hover with the pointer over the title bar, it's selected, and then you can rename the document. It's very well done. It sort of works like on the Mac. I think on the Mac, you can select the name of a document in a window, in any window, and you can rename it. And this is exactly what IA Writer has done on iPad as well. This feature is, I feel like it's one of the features that I've been anticipating for a long time. You can highlight text inside Markdown. So if you surround any text with 2 equal signs, that portion of text gets highlighted in yellow. And this is fantastic for folks like me who write long stories, but maybe some parts of those stories will have to be revisited later. And I've always wanted to be able to mark certain sections in my stories for review. Maybe because I'm talking about a feature that I'm not so sure about. Maybe because I mentioned a bug, but maybe that bug will be fixed in the future. And now I can highlight that text. And that way, when I go back and edit my story, I will see that highlighted comment and I will know that I need to do something there. So highlighting text, really well done. And it doesn't force you to stop using Markdown, unlike, say, Scrivener, which Scrivener offers support for highlighting passages of text, but you have to use the rich text format. And here, you can just keep using Markdown. So that's very well done. There's a new PDF preview. It allows you to use your custom themes and your custom preview templates for PDF export. So if you care about exporting your stories to PDF, there's a much improved menu to switch between web preview and PDF preview, and the PDF preview is fully integrated with custom themes. So now I can make PDF documents that I can share with other people, and those PDF documents look exactly like MacStories because I have an IA Writer preview theme that looks like the website. So this is very nice. And finally, this is something that I also enabled right away as soon as I saw it in the beta. You can enable multiple stats at the same time. IA Writer has a stat bubble UI element that floats toward the top of the screen. Some people don't like it. I personally don't mind it. And now you can have multiple counts going at the same time. So it used to be that you had to choose between, say, word count and character count. Now you can have two going at the same time. And personally, I like to have word count and task count open at the same time, so that I see the total number of words in my current document, but also the tasks that I have open in the document. It's a very nice touch.
All right, Federico, I want to talk to you about a brand new app that we covered for the very first time this week, which is called Directive. And this app fits really well with the theme of this week's episode of App Stories, where we talked all about a new generation of apps, because this is an app that comes as a universal purchase across the Mac, the iPad, and the iPhone. And what it is it's a task manager for recurring maintenance tasks. So think of the kind of things like home maintenance or car maintenance, or even things like, personal care type stuff, like remembering to go to the dentist or to get an annual checkup. They're kind of long. You can use it for shorter term things, but I think it's really geared towards the kinds of recurring tasks that come up that you only do maybe a few times a year, or, maybe every 2 months, that kind of thing. Because in addition to allowing you to set up a task and have reminders and that sort of thing, you can store a little bit of data alongside here. For instance, if you have a certain kind of oil that your car needs, you can have that logged in the app as well. Or if you have a URL to set up an appointment on your doctor's website, you can do that, and there'll be a button inside the UI where you just click the button and it'll open up Safari right to your doctor's office website. That kind of thing. And on top of that, it tracks the past occurrences that you've completed, so you can see a complete catalog of all the times that you've done a task. And you can add a note to that, so you can remind yourself of maybe they found a particular problem wrong with your car the last time you took it in for service. And what I like about this is it's a theme that you and I have talked about a million times in the past. It's the single purpose or the narrow purpose app versus the general purpose app, because these are the kind of things you could do this in Things, or you could do it in OmniFocus or Todoist or whatever. But I think that there's definitely an appeal and an advantage sometimes to peeling these kinds of tasks out of a task manager, where they just become clutter, and putting them in a dedicated app that's got some features that are designed to work particularly well with those kind of tasks, and do it that way. Because yes, now you've got the overhead of dealing with two separate apps. However, you don't have the clutter of stuffing too much into a general purpose app, which is why I really like this app, because it does have a nice attention to detail and some features that are really specific to these kind of tasks. And it also represents kind of this new generation of apps that we're seeing that are coming out simultaneously across all platforms. And it's just really a cool app.
Yeah, and I agree. The idea of splitting some of your tasks into a more dedicated utility always sounds like a good idea to me.
Yep.
This week, we also saw a substantial update to Logic Pro 10 on the Mac and Logic Remote, which is the companion utility for iPad. You covered this when the news came out, John. What is new in Logic Pro 10?
All right. So this is an update that's geared towards musicians, and that was pretty clear from the quotes they had. They had quotes from Phineas O'Connell, who is the producer for Billie Eilish, and some other people as well. And it's focused on loops, samples, and drum machine design. Now, those are things that I don't personally do, but they're the kind of things that I think a lot of musicians were going to third-party apps to get. And now they can do them better inside of Logic. Some of these are brand new to Logic. Some of these are updates to existing features. These aren't the kind of things that I'll ever use in Logic, since I'm just editing podcasts in the app. But it's a pretty exciting.
Maybe we should have a drum machine in App Store.
We should. We'll just have a beat going in the background the whole time. Mm-hmm. But these, it's a pretty substantial and exciting update, and it seems as though Apple is really pushing music creation on the Mac even further. One of the things that is also really kind of cool is there's a sample project in there, which is Billie Eilish's song Ocean Eyes, and you can go in and you can see exactly how that song was produced using Logic. And for someone who is interested in picking up that kind of skill, there's nothing more valuable than to see someone who's a professional in this space and how they actually took on that kind of task. So, I mean, I plan to poke around in it myself just because I find that sort of thing really fascinating as kind of a look behind the scenes of a song that I like. So, yeah, it's really good. I mean, I think to me it's a little disappointing that the iPad app and the iPhone app is still a companion app. It's called Logic Remote. It got updated too, so it can control a lot of these loops and samples and other things as well. But at this point, with the iPad and the iPhone not really having very good audio in and out controls, as we talked about on App Store, we're going to talk about on App Stories next week. I don't think that anything but a companion app is probably possible yet. Maybe someday Logic will still come to the iPad, but for now, it remains a companion app that can sit next to your Mac and help you with, putting controls on the iPad as opposed to the screen of your Mac.
So a couple more things that we covered on the site. BookTrack, which is this new book tracking utility that came out a few months ago. Ryan originally reviewed BookTrack when it came out, and there's a new 1.2 update that came out a few days ago. There is a couple of interesting additions. You now have reading status. You have statistics that show you how many books, for example, you've been reading on any given month. You can save quotes from books. You can even use the document scanner, the system document scanner, to take a picture of a physical book that you're reading, and then you can crop the quote that you want to save. And BookTrack will use OCR to save that quote in the app, which is kind of neat and sort of speaks to the idea of these modern technologies that Apple gives you if you're a developer for free, and you can add to your application and make it so much more dynamic and smarter and full featured. And also you have a new loan status page where you can see all the books that you've loaned out to other people, which I've never done in my life, but I guess it's kind of cool if you're that type of person. Right. And also I want to mention this link post that I did. I linked to Shortcuts Wishlist by Jordan Merrick. And Jordan has an excellent series of wishes about shortcuts that I do not want to repeat here because it'll be an hour-long conversation. But essentially, we share a lot of the same frustrations when it comes to shortcuts, especially shortcuts for power users. So go check it out. There's a link on MacStories, and you will also find the link in the show notes. It's a very good wish list.
All right, Federico, let's move on to the club this week. We had a lot in this issue, and it starts at the top with one of our favorite apps, which is Daisy Disk, which is an app that I covered for the newsletter. It's a Mac app that lets you visualize the storage on your Mac. And it's just a fantastic way to very quickly find those space-wasting apps that are out there that you want to get rid of and free up some space. Because I was running up against some storage issues this week with my Mac Mini because I had a bunch of audio files and some videos that I had downloaded that I'd forgotten about, and a bunch of other things that were just cluttering up my SSD and needed to get rid of. And with just like 5 or 10 minutes of poking around in Daisy Disk, I was able to get rid of it. So I've got all the details over there on that. You had a whole bunch of shortcuts that you created because one of the things we do is we ask people for requests for shortcuts as well as questions that they have, and you went through our long list and came up with a whole bunch.
Yeah, I went through the list of shortcuts that people can submit for MacStories Weekly. This is one of the many perks of Club MacStories. You can ask us questions and you can submit your shortcuts requests, and I do my best to every once in a while go through the list and address some of these requests, and others I cannot address because they tend to be either like impossible features that I would love to have in shortcuts, however they don't exist, so there's nothing I can do about them. And I would rather, I don't like the idea of in every single issue of Weekly say, unfortunately, this shortcut cannot be created. It's kind of a bummer. So I tend to I appreciate the requests that come in, but I tend not to address them because it's kind of sad if every single time I would have to say, yeah, unfortunately, this feature is not supported. But every once in a while, I go in and I take all the requests that are possible and I make shortcuts for people. So this week, there's a whole collection of them. There's 2 shortcuts for visualizing data in Charty. And Charty is this new utility for iOS that lets you create charts using shortcuts. So it's a very fascinating implementation of parameters in shortcuts to create charts like pie charts and donut charts and line charts, whatever, using data from shortcuts. I created 2 of them. One to visualize your data from OmniFocus, and specifically which projects for which projects you completed the most tasks during the last week. So it counts the tasks that you completed in any of your OmniFocus projects and plots them in a donut chart so that you can see a quick visualization of which projects you were busiest dealing with for the past 7 days. And similarly, the second shortcut that I made, it's called Time Chart. So the first one is called OmniChart, and the second one is called Time Chart. And Time Chart is similar in that it shows you a donut chart for the projects in Timery that you spent the most time in working on for the past week. So data from Timery, the third-party client for Toggle, the time tracking service, combined with Charty on iOS to create a chart. So kind of fascinating use case because I'm using 2 third-party apps that return and deal with data inside shortcuts. So one, it highlights the benefits of parameters, right? Apps being able to talk to each other and exchange data to come up with something that the system couldn't possibly support by default. I also created a shortcut to turn multiple URLs into individual PDF documents. So if you have a list of links, you can turn those links into, say, 20, 30, 50 PDF documents all at once and save them all to the Files app. It's a long list. I shared a shortcut to move all of your reminders to OmniFocus. So if you wanna switch task managers, there's a shortcut that will take all of your reminders and copy them into a specific project in OmniFocus while keeping their titles, their due dates, their notes. There are some caveats that I explained in the newsletter, but this is a pretty solid system if you want to move all of your reminders in batch from reminders to OmniFocus. I also shared a new version of my mail merge shortcut that allows you to perform mail merge on iOS using shortcuts and mail. Basically, given a list of email addresses, this shortcut contains a template where for each email address, an email message will be generated, and for each person, a different placeholder will be filled. So if you ever had to do mail merge on a computer before, this is sort of similar, but it supports, unlike my original version of mail merge, which only supported one variable per person, this one supports multiple variables for each individual email message. And lastly, I shared a shortcut to convert an article to the PDF version of the Safari Reader version of that article. So Shortcuts has support for extracting the Safari Reader cleaned up HTML of a page. However, it does not come with the Safari Reader CSS. So I shared a version of the shortcut that allows you to use your own custom CSS to turn web pages from Safari, articles from Safari, into cleaned up articles that remove all extraneous content like ads and interactive elements while using custom CSS and saving the final result to PDF. So it's I think it's a good collection of shortcuts for all kinds of people this week.
Yeah, that's really cool. We also have, I'll just run down through what else we have in Weekly this week, which is a whole bunch of answers to Q&A. I've got like a recommendation for wish listing apps, another one for CRM systems, which is not something that really falls into what I do most of the time, but probably I'm better suited to respond to that than anyone else. And how to download YouTube videos using a command line tool called A Shell. We have, on top of that, we have an interview with Zach Cohen, who's the developer of Solver. And we've also got a story from Ryan about News Plus and the rumor that Apple is working on audio versions of News Plus stories and what that means to the platform. So there's a lot there, plus an episode of MacStories Unplugged, which is our club exclusive podcast where Federico and I talk about research tools and a bunch of other things that are on our minds leading up to doing the annual reviews that we put out at the end of the summer and early fall at MacStories. All right, Federico, before we get to our Unwind picks, it's time to take a quick break and thank our sponsor. You know, MacStories and this episode of Unwind are both brought to you this week by Concepts. Concepts is where ideas take shape. The app is an infinite canvas iPad and iPhone app that adapts to a ton of different use cases, whether it's mind mapping or note-taking, drawing, storyboarding, graphic design, architectural planning, and a whole lot more. There's just so much you can do with this app. It takes advantage of the touch interface by allowing users to create everything from great-looking notes to complex vector graphics. There are lots and lots of tools built into it, too. There are hundreds of customizable brushes, grids for laying out your graphics, guides for creating perfect shapes, and layer support, among a bunch of other tools. And the app even has a built-in presentation mode that works with video conferencing apps like Zoom for whiteboarding with your remote colleagues. You know, Federico, I'm not an artist, but I do love using this app. It's something that I turn to whenever we're thinking about a brand new project. Right at the very start, I like to mind map in handwriting the ideas that I have for a project and then use it as a way to organize those before really turning to something a little more structured, like, you know, maybe MindNote or a text editor or whatever it happens to be. Concepts is free to download and try, and the full tool set is available either as a subscription or an in-app purchase. Go over to concepts.app to learn more about the app, or check out the sponsor post that we have on MacStories this week. I'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. Our thanks to Concepts for the support of MacStories this week. Okay, Federico, let's turn to picks.
Okay. What you got for me?
I've got two for you. I decided to go music this week.
Okay.
And one thing that crossed my path this week is a new show on Beats One on Apple Music, which is called the Billie Eilish and Dad Show.
I've seen this one. Yes.
Have you listened to it yet?
No, I haven't. Is
All
it
right.
good?
Well, you should. It is good. It is good. It's the two of them have a radio show where they talk about the music that they've introduced to each other over the years. And, you know, it's interesting to me because it's always interesting to me when people of different ages who have different perspectives on music share the kinds of music that influenced their lives and their taste in music. And it works really well in that way because both of them are clearly very into music and have different tastes that both overlap. And it's kind of an interesting combination storytelling, especially if you're a fan of Billie Eilish's music. You know, you get a little bit of flavor for her life and her family and that sort of thing. But also an interesting combination of influences on her as an artist that came from her father and from other people, as well as the kind of music that he was introduced to by her. And so I just love that dynamic because it's something that I feel like plays out for a lot of people. Sometimes, you know, people get stuck in their own pattern of they like the music they liked when they were in high school or college. And that is always probably the time period that has the greatest influence on a particular person. But I like the idea of remaining open to trying new things and to talking with others of different, I guess, backgrounds and influences in the music scene to kind of modify and evolve your own taste. And I think this show really plays into that. And related to that, I just wanted to share my 2020 playlist, my 2020 mix. It's super simple. All I do is throughout the year, as I'm listening to new songs, if there's something I really like, I drop it in this playlist. That's all there is to it. But it evolves over time. Things are added. And as I get tired of things and realize maybe I don't like the song as much as I thought I did, they get removed. And at the end of the year, I leave it alone. But I don't know what's in there right now. It's probably I don't even know how many songs, maybe 30 songs or so at this point in the year, maybe more. But it's what I like to do is when I don't know what to play and I don't want anything old, I just want something relatively new that I like, I just put this on shuffle and listen to it. So I'll link that as well. And what I like too is that it's you'll find if you listen to this that it's a very broad mix of music, and I like a lot of different kinds of music. I used to feel like I needed to like certain music because it was the cool music. Now I just don't care anymore. I mean, I think maybe working on the internet helps with that, don't you think?
I think it does.
I really don't care. So you'll find some pop songs on there that maybe aren't your taste. You'll also find all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's probably more alternative than anything else because that's kind of my background. But I've been influenced by a lot of people who are my friends too. I mean, including you, Federico. So it's a wide variety of songs, and you might like it, you might not, but maybe give it a try, and maybe you'll find something new and interesting.
Very nice.
What do you have for me this week?
I have a movie, and it's a silly one, but it's just what I needed this week. So Sylvia and I were looking for a silly comedy to watch for like 90 minutes a couple of nights ago. And so my recommendation is Jexi. So that's Jexi. It's this silly romantic comedy. The whole premise is that there's a Siri-like assistant on the main protagonist on the main protagonist's phone, and Jexi takes over this person's life. So it's basically Siri with an attitude that can basically cause all kinds of problems for this person. Putting the main character played by Adam Devine. How do you say this?
Divine. I think.
Yeah. He's been on a bunch of TV shows and movies. You've seen his face a lot. If you're also the kind of person who watches, TV show comedies and romantic comedies and stuff. So he's basically like this sort of a lonely nerd who works at this BuzzFeed-like publication in San Francisco, working on creating lists for the internet, but he really wants to be a journalist. And he falls in love with this with this girl who works at a bike shop. And however, the problem is that Jexi, when he gets a new phone, Jexi starts taking over his life by giving him like wrong directions for maps, or putting him in awkward situations, talking out loud via the iPhone speakers from during a meeting, getting him fired from his job because Jexi sends a bunch of inappropriate emails to the entire office. So it's this romantic comedy featuring an evil assistant on your phone. It's very silly. It's very fun. 90 minutes of your time. I rented it from the iTunes store. It's $6. And I should say, for the sake of context, that the version that I watched had explicit scenes and language. So be mindful of that if you're planning on watching this movie with kids. But it's very fun. And yeah, 90 minutes of your time, a silly romantic comedy featuring the scenario of what if Siri went rogue on your iPhone and started doing a bunch of evil things. That's the premise of the movie. Also, by next week, I should have a bunch of music recommendations because there's new music coming out. And I've been listening to the new album by Hayley Williams, but I'm not ready to talk about it yet. I have a bunch of music stuff to share. So stay tuned for next week for more music stuff.
I'm looking forward to that. I could use some recommendations. All right, Federico, that's a good place to stop for this week. Please check out our sponsor. That's Concepts. You can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net too. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram. He's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next Friday, Federico.
Ciao, John.